So you might be like, this guy makes money betting, and then he just told me to look at the score of the game.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Lines, the only podcast purifying the sports betting industry. Remember to like, download, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you have a sports betting story you want to share, maybe the books aren't treating you right, drop us a note in the comments below. We will be sure to get back to you. We might feature your story here on the podcast. We might even bring you on and invite you on to share it with the world. All right. I'm your host, Shane Mercer. That guy over there, Andrew Pace, the founder of the most sophisticated sports betting community on planet Earth, inplayLIVE. And Pacer, today we are talking about NHL. The hockey season is upon us. By the time this episode comes out on Wednesday, the puck will have already dropped. Season begins Tuesday, October 10th. And so hockey action will be in full swing, and it just kind of adds to the plate, the massive sports plate that October brings. You know, here in Canada, we celebrate Thanksgiving. Well, we have a massive sports feast that begins in October every year. Right? We've got NFL football. It's in full swing, and man, we're crushing it on that side of things. And now we've also got MLB playoffs. I mean, important baseball. Heartbreak for the Blue Jays. I hate to have to bring it up, but it was tough. But meaningful baseball being played in October, which is always fun. And now, of course, we got hockey starting. And not too far off from that, we've got NBA. But today's episode, all about the NHL. Pace, when it comes to your history of betting on NHL, give us a little bit of a sense of the kind of success you've had.
The success has been remarkable, betting on hockey into the seven figures. A lot of fun, a big learning process. And I think what I've done in my lifetime is just followed the trends of the way the game has changed throughout, from the 90s onward. And I wasn't betting back then, but just noticing that analytics had really I guess had been missing in hockey, and started to become a greater factor in the way coaches were playing certain scenarios and training their players how to play them. And then obviously a lot of rule changes over the decades. I remember the old 2-line pass rule and foot in the crease rule, and I think Gary Bettman, a lot of people, whenever a commissioner comes on the screen, they boo the commissioner. Gary Bettman's definitely no exception. Like, he gets booed so hard when he comes on the screen. But so growing up playing like street hockey, I played street hockey with Andrew Ladd a couple of times, and he lived on my block, and I remember him winning the Stanley Cup in Carolina in his rookie year, and he actually brought the cup home to our neighborhood. But point being, I can remember that Stanley Cup final where people in Carolina were actually asking what the sport was. They didn't even know what it was. So if people said hockey, they'd go like, "Oh, what's that?" And I can't remember who they played in that final, but it was cheaper to fly in, buy your ticket in Carolina, pay for all your meals in Carolina, pay for your hotel in Carolina, than just the ticket of their opponent. And they were almost giving the tickets away, trying to get people aware of hockey. But the point of what I'm bringing up is that I think Bettman's actually done a good job of making hockey and the rules more exciting, to the point now where we've got a product where I think it's highly entertaining, as entertaining as any sport, and unique in the sense that obviously, it's played on ice and skates, and you can hit and fight, and some of the things that happen in hockey, like you just look at the NFL and how aggressive and how many injuries are in the NFL and how physical the NFL is. And then you just watch a bench clearing brawl in hockey where no one gets a penalty. And you just think, like, what if this was the NFL right now? There'd be fines, suspensions, like you name it, right? And hockey's hockey's kind of, I want to say it's kind of great for that, but at the same time, it's so strange. But yeah, Bettman's done a good job of creating a product that I think is very competitive in the world of sports, but also one that was potentially having a little bit of regression or failing to an extent. If we rewind the tape and you think about a team like the Atlanta Thrashers that started and then failed, and yet obviously now expansion teams just being like major factors in the NHL. The Vegas Golden Knights just won the freaking Stanley Cup, and when you guys are watching this, I will have attended the cup ceremony at the opening game, and sure enough, they're playing the other expansion team, the Seattle Kraken, who in their second season made the playoffs. So these expansion teams have become extremely competitive. They've gone to markets that I think Seattle's a slam dunk. They've got an amazing sports fan base. But people said we already saw it with the jersey I'm rocking right now. We already saw it with Arizona. You can't do hockey in the desert. That's what they said. And they said it'll never work in Vegas. If you have been to a Vegas Golden Knights game, you know what I'm about to say. But if you haven't, you have to go, because it's a party with everything that Las Vegas has to offer. So a cirque show, a show, a party, drummers, dancers, cheerleaders, and as my buddy puts it, it's a party and hockey's just there. But it is such a well-built stadium, but also just such a great product that not only has Vegas been a remarkably successful expansion team and a remarkable success for the league itself in creating this amazing product in a market that isn't known for hockey. Uh, um, they have really proven just how great hockey is by doing all those things, and they freaking won the Stanley Cup. Shane, I know you're in Toronto, so we're just not even gonna go there. But like, people make fun of Leafs fans and people make fun of the Leafs because of their struggles in the playoffs. Well, I'm in Vancouver, so it's like, make fun all you want. We don't even make the playoffs ever. So you got this freaking team that comes in and wins the Stanley Cup in like their fourth season, and they've been to two finals. Maybe it was their fifth season. I don't know. They've been to two finals. But yeah, anyways, I think Bettman's done a great job with the sport. The product is excellent. It's highly entertaining. And go to a Knights game if you guys ever can. It's a great experience.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of touch on there. I do agree that Gary Bettman might be the most hated commissioner in all of sports.
Yeah.
But yes, at the same time, he's done a phenomenal job at growing the league, growing the popularity of the sport, and making it appeal to an American audience. So there has to be some kudos to be shared there. Absolutely. I don't know how many Canadians are on that Las Vegas Knights Golden Knights team, but it is always a bit frustrating to see those American teams perform better than our Canadian teams, isn't it?
Oh, well, I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, when was the last time a Canadian team even won the Stanley Cup? Or I know I can think of heartbreak, Canucks 2011. I know the Oilers, the Flames, they all have been to game sevens of the Stanley Cup and
Yeah,
can't get it done. The Montreal Canadiens, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We saw them go, and yeah, it's tough. It's tough on that front. Okay, popularity of the sport growing. How are the sports books treating hockey when in comparison to the other big major sports, football, basketball, baseball?
So if we look at NHL over the last decade, and that's really where I've been betting it. In the last 10 years, I would say, is where I've been betting this to a certain degree of success that's actually providing me with a positive return. And if you're watching this, we do bet live. That is what I'm referencing when I'm talking about success. But what I'm going to touch on here is a little bit of pregame. So there's something that I always say in baseball. I say, every team wins 60 games. Well, in hockey, it's kind of a similar statement, but there's half the games. Say, every team wins like 30 games. Maybe it's 20, but every team wins 20, 30 games. So you do have that element of obviously chaos in every single sport that we cover in any sport period, where any team can beat, any team. But I would say that the sports books inadequately handicapped hockey for a very, very long time. And the legalization of betting across North America, but more specifically, the legalization of Ontario, it really changed things, like, significantly. And I'll tell you, up to about 2019, maybe 2018, to get a pregame favorite of minus 200 in the NHL was extremely uncommon. Extremely uncommon. And just flip open the menu. You guys are listening to this. Flip open the menu for the week and take a look. You're going to see minus 300, 400, 500. And yes, I've seen the team I'm rocking here as a minus 600 underdog last season. So very, very big changes in the way money's coming in and the way money's being handled. And I think that there actually was value. And again, I'm saying I think because I don't bet pregame. I think there was value on some minus 150 to minus 200 NHL favorites to pre-2018. But I honestly don't know. I just think there must have been if this is how the game's being handicapped today. So that has been a dramatic change in live betting as well, because now instead of having, a whole bunch of pick'ems skating around on the ice, you do have this minus 4, 5, 600 favorite that's out there. And how do you bet on that, right? And I think the answer to that obviously depends, but there certainly are opportunities because of it. But I will say that the volume of the sport has decreased if the game has been more correctly handicapped, because if you have a favorite that should have been that used to be minus 150 or minus 200, that's now minus 5 or minus 600, it's really hard to get any value in on the favorite side. And I only want to be wagering on an underdog when that underdog is actually performing. So now we're talking about this really rare game where you've got, a plus 300, plus 400 pregame underdog that is actually outperforming their opponent and then presenting opportunities to wager on. So yeah, that whole transition has been really interesting. And you asked, like, how do the books handle it compared to the other sports? I think it's become more of a focus for them, especially since Ontario got legalized, because I don't know any statistics about the handle sport by sport per specific region. But I would presume that one of the most wagered on sports in Ontario is hockey, and that shift you could really see last season.
North of the border, absolutely, right? You can totally see how, the legalization and the opening up of the market, combined with this ingrained love for the sport, is going to turn into a significant amount of wagers being placed on the games. Absolutely. And I love that you are rocking that Arizona Coyotes jersey there. I almost called them, the nickname that we give them within inplayLIVE, but we absolutely love Arizona teams at inplayLIVE. If you want to find out why, well, you can always join and hear the stories behind it. But we have that promo code for you, behind the lines, all caps. But yes, we absolutely love Arizona teams for that reason. They're often underdogs, and they're underdogs that can often outperform expectations. So Pace, when you're looking for these teams out there on the ice and you're watching them play, what are you looking for? How do you determine whether a team is outperforming expectation?
Well, I think there's some metrics that you can use with any sport. And they're obvious. So you might be like, this guy makes money betting, and then he just told me to look at the score of the game. But like, the score,
The score,
like,
yeah.
let's make things simple, and you should be having fun with this stuff. So you don't need some fucking, Harvard degree to figure some of this stuff out. But the first metric, and I think this is any sport. So if we're talking about the Arizona Coyotes, the Arizona Diamondbacks, or the Arizona Cardinals, again, Arizona Diamondbacks, they're underdogs twice. wild card, and boom, the 2-0 and off to the next round of the playoffs. So Arizona being underdogs just is seems like it's been very consistent in the world of sports in the last few years. But yeah, I mean the score is the first most obvious one. The second one with hockey specifically is going to be um, time of possession, shots on goal. That gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how that team's playing, and that doesn't mean that they need to be, dominating them, but like, is this a game? Are there two teams out there that are going back and forth, right? And then of course is actually just watching the game itself. And with big underdogs, some crazy lines can pop up, right? Like you might be able to snag something in the first period where potentially they don't even need to score to win the bet. Um, they just need to not be scored on. And if they are playing well, that's great. The other thing too about early in games, so this is one that's really consistent with the NBA. Um, there is 80 game schedules, right? So hockey, basketball, and then of course baseball. You come out and dog it a little bit against a dog sometimes. And there was a clip from a few years back, and it was I think it was Carl Anthony Towns playing. He was playing Fortnite with someone, and it was another NBA player. And he was about to go to bed, and he's like, "Who are you playing tomorrow?" And he's like, "The Hawks." And he's like, "Oh, you good for one more game?" So essentially saying like, you don't need a good sleep. You're playing the Hawks, right? And there is that nature of sports that is completely and totally unavoidable. And that is where you're a heavy favorite and you expect to win a game. And mentally, you might be, John talked about this with college football, you might be looking towards your game against the Lightning or the Knights or whomever, and not as focused on your game against Arizona. And maybe you didn't game plan for them as much as you would any other team, or practice for them as much as any other team. And you might find yourself down 2-0 early in the game, right? And that doesn't mean these guys are going to win. It just usually, oftentimes early on in games with these high volume schedules, you can catch a favorite that's starting a little slow. And the flip side is, of course, the underdog who goes, these guys aren't giving us a chance. Like, let's go put everything out there that we possibly can. And I remember we had bet on the Sharks last year. This isn't a good story, unfortunately, but we were just going nuts. Like the Sharks went up 4-2, I think, with like a minute 30 left in the third period. And they almost lost the game in regulation, but they ended up losing it in overtime. So we lost our bet. But all of a sudden the favorite can go, hey, like, let's just turn the Jets on here a little bit. And that's all a part of successful betting as well, is looking at what's happening in the game itself. And so some of those metrics like the score, shots, time of possession, but then obviously seeing how that transitions over time throughout the game, because that same favorite mentality, regardless of who's in the lead, can flip in the middle of the game, based on the coach, based on how certain teams handle having a lead. So a team might be up 2 goals and they stop playing aggressive. They go, okay, guys, we're not, we're keeping 3 guys back. We're not racing 2 forwards, different formations, all that kind of stuff. And they're not even trying to score anymore. And sometimes when you see that, you go, well, where does that leave us from a betting standpoint? And yeah, if you are paying attention to these kind of things, you can start to track, of course, um, the wagers that you've made, but also teams' tendencies and how they handle certain situations. Like how does this particular team handle a 2+ goal lead? And once you can database that a little bit, you can start to find opportunities really for any sport. But I think is hockey is is a sport with a lot of opportunity. So when you see this stuff in real time, then you can start to take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I want to, you touched on a few things there. We often talk about teams' motivations and where we're trying to align with their motivations, or perhaps if you're a favorite going up against a heavy underdog, your lack of motivation. Then you've got the coaching tendencies, right? And all of those other metrics that are happening within the game, like you mentioned, obviously the score, but shots on goal, time of possession, all that sort of stuff. So do you track all of this, and kind of what goes into the data compilation and the analytics of it all?
Yeah, and it's, when you bring that up, it's funny. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a guy who does help us quite a bit with our analytics in hockey and everything that we do track. So yeah, we track a lot of stuff, more than I can process myself. And sometimes when I see our database of information for hockey, it's just incredible, what we've put together. So not allowed to say his name, but shout out to that guy that people know who he is, that you're not allowed to talk about in our group. Um, but he said to me, I'm like, hey man, like I'd love to have you on to discuss hockey, and I think this was for maybe like a Q&A with our members. And he's like, he goes, honestly, I'd be embarrassed going on. Like, I don't know any players in the league. Like, I don't know anyone. And I think that one of the things that's happened with inplayLIVE is a whole bunch of people that joined to make money betting that didn't follow hockey, that a lot of people now say they love hockey, or it's their favorite sport, or have really gotten into it. But I myself can speak for my own situation. I really don't know personnel. I know some guys, but like there are some diehard hockey fans in our group where they say a player's name or whatever, and I don't even know what team he's on, or if he's a veteran or a rookie, or anything.
Okay, Pace, I can totally relate to what you're getting at there, because I knew nothing about hockey. Okay, I'm in Toronto, and you can see behind me, I've got a lot of basketball stuff. I love football. I'm a big Jays fan, and hockey kind of ranks significantly lower on the list for me. In fact, I mentioned those sports. I also love MMA. I enjoy golf. And so hockey really, really falls down the list for me in terms of the sports that I'm interested in, sports that I'm into. And so when I first joined in Play Live, and I saw all of this hype around hockey, I was like, really? All right, these guys really like hockey. Fine, we're here. We are. We'll bet on some hockey, and I'm one of those people that over the course of the season, it became the kind of thing where it's like, oh, Tuesday's here. We got a big slate of puck tonight, and I'm telling my wife, and she's like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Kind of, and I know, I know players on the Leafs. I know some players, the big players on the different teams and the stars and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't know much about these players. I don't know much about the personnel. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but when you're with a huge group of people like we are, I didn't play live, it kind of doesn't matter. Or I can lean on other people's strengths, and sort of lean on those people who do know a lot of that information. And then, like the guy you mentioned who, cannot be named, who we did invite to come on the show to talk about hockey, and who I hopefully will get on the show at some point later in the season to talk about hockey. Not knowing, and kind of being embarrassed of this idea. Well, I actually don't know that much about the sport. Well, or know that much about the actual teams and the players and that kind of thing, or the history. It goes to show you that you don't need to be an expert in the sport to know how to bet on it and make money off of it over time. So what would you say to the average recreational sports bettor who, was maybe like me and more interested in just football or basketball and those kinds of sports, and sort of, didn't really ever consider hockey?
Yeah, well, we kind of make a joke sometimes, the less you know, the better. But the actual, because, and then I always say information is power, so which obviously contradicts each other. When I say the less you know, the better, what it is no bias heading into the rink in this particular example. So when you don't have that bias, that allows you to just simply look at that data and then watch what's going on in that particular game. So if you do have historic data for previous years, and then obviously the current season, for whatever it is that you're tracking or wagering on, and then obviously on top of that, what's going on in that particular game. The personnel isn't maybe as important as you think it is, and I would say that in football, let's say that you have the star quarterback go down. Personnel is pretty important. In football, if you're betting on player props, I would say personnel is pretty important. And then when you factor in those same metrics, so the coach and the analytics and how that game's going and all that kind of stuff, that can oftentimes lead to opportunities betting that relate to personnel. The handle for hockey is far less than football. The handle for the NHL is far less than the NFL. So we don't necessarily have a lot of those same markets relating to personnel. And at the same time, um, yards is a huge thing in football, and they're consistent and they're ongoing and common. In the NBA, points are consistent, they're fast, they're ongoing. Whereas in the NHL, if you have a 10 goal game, that's an extremely high scoring game. So you're looking at a couple of goals a period, typically speaking, like based on averages over time. So you don't, and you're not betting on how long one player has the puck, right? So from that standpoint, personnel isn't necessarily important, but we do have some guys in the group that are really dialed into personnel, and they're betting on shots on goal and things like that. But again, a lot of that isn't live. You do have to get those bets in pregame, so it isn't necessarily based on what you're seeing in that game. Now, it's something that you have to have data patterns for. From previous games, and then obviously knowledge of what's going on in that particular game. Like, as an example, is said player on the power play tonight that usually isn't, and the books haven't handicapped that properly as it relates to maybe an assist, a goal, shots on goal, all that kind of stuff. So there are personnel opportunities in hockey, like without debate. But I would say overall, it eliminates your bias and it allows you to go into any one given game without any fanship or particular thought process towards who is or is not playing in that game.
Right. Well, I've got to say that, we are holding quite a bit back in terms of what we do for hockey. If you really want to learn and find out what inplayLIVE bets on when it comes to hockey, I encourage you to join, sign up, become a member, use that promo code behind the lines, all caps, and you will find out what it is exactly that we're doing to bet on hockey, because the hockey strategies are really amazing. And when it comes to live betting, it's great that there's it doesn't necessarily take the same kind of time commitment that perhaps NFL takes or that NBA takes. And as Pate's kind of mentioned in here too, is that there's tons of opportunity to capitalize on big underdogs, and so that's always appealing when you have those really big numbers. All right, Pace, we're just running out of time here, but is there anything else you'd like to add on hockey before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I think that heading into this season, there's a lot of really exciting changes in the NHL, and I think that this is pretty consistent with the NHL. So if you're betting on hockey, and I'm not referring to the NHL, if you're betting on hockey, it's really important to not come out of the gate overly aggressive because of the fact that each season is different, and especially when I reference my start with the NHL. Analytics have changed and rules have changed significantly throughout that time, and then the way the sports books handle everything relating to the sport has changed, not kind of, like, drastically. So regardless of what you're betting on, make sure that you're wagering on things that are consistent with how that team typically performs in the situation that they are currently in. And then there's a whole other series of factors relating to sort of the middle to the end of the season as it relates to the playoffs and the motivations associated with those. So there's 6 teams with new coaches this season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what's interesting is typically in the NHL, when you have a coaching change, you can point to that team's that coach's previous experience. And what's crazy is we have a new coach for the Anaheim Ducks. Great. I mean, that team's awful. They got to try. They got to try something, right?
Yeah.
And it's his name is Greg Cronin, and he was the head coach of the Avalanche in the AHL. So we get a new guy that comes into the league, and just like with football, when you see Matt Rule come in and coach Carolina, you could sometimes see some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Washington Capitals have a new coach. Well, he was the Maple Leafs assistant coach, so he doesn't have head coaching experience. Columbus Blue Jackets have a new coach, and he was the Jackets assistant. So he got
Okay.
promoted in that team. The Flames coach was the Flames assistant, the Flames new coach. The Rangers stole the head coach from the Capitals, the previous head coach from the Capitals. So that's usually what we see is, oh, he was the head coach for the Canucks, or he was the head coach for the Predators. And you go, oh, right, that guy. And then you can look at some of your old data and things like that on that particular coach. But yeah, it's a bunch of coaches from without necessarily NHL head coaching experience before. And then Nashville is a new head coach. So, and he was from the Panthers. And last season was the Devils assistant coach. So when we look at these 6 teams, that means for me that there are potentially new opportunities, and you can almost throw your data in the trash from those teams in previous seasons because of the fact that the way coaches attack with the lead or sit back could be a major factor in how those particular coaches handle those situations, and then how they play when they're down. Like, do they give up? Do they throw in the towel? Or are they playing super aggressive, trying to come back and win? All those types of things. And hockey is one of these sports where the lines don't just kind of change. Everything is impacted in a fraction of a second, because that's all that it takes to score. And scoring is it's probably most comparable to soccer or European football, but the volume of scoring is obviously higher. So everything changes in an instant, in 1 second. So when those lines open back up, you're in a completely new situation than you just were previously, and that presents opportunity. So with any sport, head into it very level-headed, very much with the mindset of learning and not risking significant money, and then with success only, ramp up from there. If you are betting on pregame hockey, remember, when you're looking at a minus 400, minus 300, minus 600 favorite, that every team they're playing against more or less is going to win 20 to 30 games. So do you want to be betting on that line based on that information? Factor that into your decision making, and as always, like with everything, just make sure you're having fun.
I love it. Great pieces of advice there. Always start small at the beginning of a season and ramp up with success, only with success. I love that. That can apply to every sport, but absolutely with hockey, 100%. And you mentioned the speed of hockey. Well, you know what? There's another fast sport that's about to begin. We have the NBA season also kicking off this month. We will have an NBA episode coming out for all of you after this one. So next week you can expect an NBA episode. Really excited to dive into that and talk a little bit about NBA wagering. We will plan to have more hockey episodes for you too throughout the season, kind of checking in like we did with the NFL last week, doing a bit of a quarterly check-in. So, these are sports we are going to be on top of from a betting perspective throughout the entire sports season. There's so much going on. It's that busy time of year. And then we got college basketball, coming up. That's pretty soon too, in November. So, it's really, really starting to get busy out there. If you are betting on all of these sports too, just remember to make sure you're prioritizing non-sports betting time. Your loved ones, your friends, your family. Make sure you're putting in that time with them as well. And if you are betting consistently, regularly, make sure that you're keeping them aware of what it is you're doing. We don't want people out there sort of betting in the dark, right, Pace?
100%. I think that having fun is extremely important. Being transparent with the people that are in your life that are allowing you to do it, and then arguably more important than that is you don't need to track every bet. I believe that that's very important to do, so that you can see how you've done over time. But tracking money in, money out, even if it was just one bank account that you use specifically for betting, it allows you to see what was in there and what's gone or what's come back in. And at least if you have that information, it allows you to go to those people and say, hey, look, like, I know it's you don't like it, but it's a passion of mine. And, this is my bank account that has performed well over the course of time. But the flip side is going, holy smokes, like, this isn't working for me, and I am wasting a lot of time on this. I either need to sharpen my axe and find a group like inplayLIVE that can help me, or I need to move on from this and really just take a recreational or entertainment approach going forward. So factor all that stuff into all of the fall as it relates to betting, and yeah, enjoy it, because it's a great time of year to hunker down. And on that same note, with balance, get out there, get some exercise, and make sure you're moving your body at the same time. Go play some of these sports.
Go play some of these sports. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Get moving out there for sure. 100%. And we can sort of, pound the drum on this. I will continue beating the drum. Tracking is key. Money management key. We can never harp on that stuff enough. So have fun, but do those things so that you can show people your results, or you can evaluate your own results and figure out what you need to do next if it's not going well. Great advice, Pace, as always. Looking forward to chatting with you again next week for the NBA episode. And who knows, maybe we'll have a special guest on then too. All right, till next week, buddy. Keep eating those books. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join inplayLIVE, use promo code Behind the Lines.